Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities, and you can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter. I encourage you to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU, UIC, or Chicago Community Trust. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open, and you can post comments and questions. And for those of you who are following on Facebook, we encourage you strongly to go to @UICCNM on Facebook or Twitter. And if you want to participate in the chat room, you can post comments, but you'll have to open a listener-only account. You can find a link to open the account on the episode page, and you can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com or send messages through Facebook and Twitter. You'll find a Nonprofit U fan page on Facebook. For our purposes today, though, we encourage you strongly to go to the UIC CNM Facebook page so our conversations are all in one place on Facebook. We'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark, but if you're in the chat room or if you're on Facebook, you can start posting now. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. Today's episode is Rock Your Giving Tuesday, using aligned storytelling to increase fundraising. We all know how important it is to engage in Giving Tuesday activities to maximize your year-end fundraising. Today, we'll talk about storytelling strategies that will take you into Giving Tuesday and beyond. We'll talk about integrating your organization's mission, vision, and goals and objectives. We'll talk about how to blend human interest with organizational data that anticipates donor inquiries and how to achieve maximum effect by crafting stories with a backdrop, a villain, and a hero. Again, we encourage you to call in with questions and participate in live chats at about the 30-minute mark. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Nonprofit professionals are especially encouraged to call in and share your stories and questions. Our guests for today are Daniel Ash, Chief Marketing Officer for Chicago Community Trust, and Princess Currence. She's the Director of the UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management Program. In the interest of time, I won't go through a long spiel about what they've accomplished. Believe me, they have accomplished much. I will have them to introduce themselves and come to you in their own way. So without further ado, I want to say thank you so much, Princess and Daniel. It's such an honor to have you. And we'll start with you, Dan. Can you tell us about yourself, the Chicago Community Trust, and how you came to work with the organization?
Thank you, Valerie. First of all, I'm happy to be here today with you and Princess. About me and the Trust. First of all, I've been at the Trust for 4 years, and as you know, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. And simply put, my responsibility is to help build, strengthen the Chicago Community Trust brand. I want my listeners to know that the Trust serves two primary audiences. One, the nonprofit sector through grant making and convening power, and we also serve donors, so that donor advice funds at the trust. And our brand must be positioned to support sort of both of those endeavors. And I'm responsible for making sure that that happens. The trust is the area's community foundation. So, point of fact that we're the largest grant maker to sort of area nonprofits. Each year, approximately $200 million of grants are made from the trust to the region. I'll leave it there for now. Princess.
Thanks, Dan. And again, I echo for being here, and thank you for the invitation, Valerie. I'm the Director of Health Sciences Education and Workforce Development, and also Certificate for Nonprofit Management. And basically what that means is that I help organizations and people able to achieve their professional and workforce goals. And the Certificate Nonprofit Management program help practitioners really kind of grapple with and solve some of the day-to-day issues and projects they have to really move their mission and vision forward. We also help organizations figure out how to get the best out of their employees and how to kind of build capacity through our educational opportunities. I've been here at the university for about I guess almost 8 years now. I've been here at the UIC Extended Campus, which really is a kind of entrepreneurial arm of the university, where our goal is to provide educational opportunities for folks outside the traditional space, so they're able to do their advanced degrees and online at the convenience that meets their lifestyle. So really excited to talk to you about some of the experiences that I've had in a nonprofit space, having had a nonprofit and for-profit, but also focus on helping other nonprofits able to achieve capacity and continue with their vision and missions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Princess. Dan, as you know, we're in the run-up to Giving Tuesday, and folks are working fast and furiously on their year-end giving campaigns. Sometimes there's a tendency to focus so much on catchy messages that play well on social media that we forget to develop our stories and engage prospective funders after they follow up. What would you say are the key elements of a great nonprofit story?
Well, first of all, I want to make a few points about sort of what should a story do, and then I'll come back to the elements of a strong story.
Okay, great.
First and foremost, a story is a vessel that carries emotion. Right? Stories are emotional constructs, right? A good story evokes emotional response. So it doesn't matter if you're in a nonprofit space, the for-profit space, or you're in your living rooms sharing a story with your grandchildren. Stories are emotional. Stories actually most stories do a couple of things. One, they help individuals remember. Stories influence behavior. And a good story sort of connects the listener to their own sense of humanity, right? So, one way to sort of put that is, think about this in your own experience. A good story helps you reflect more deeply on who you are as an individual. So I like to start there because sometimes we make storytelling very abstract, vague, and only a few people can do it, and gifted can do it. I can't. We all tell stories every single day. So the elements of a nonprofit story. So I want to underscore just a few, just to get us started. Every good story has a character, right? There has to be an individual at the center of the story, and that individual has to have a couple of things in play. One, that character has to be seeking something. There has to be a desire for something. And that character has to endure or confront some level of conflict. Now, I know we're not sort of writing for theater, we're writing for nonprofits. But I start there, Valerie, because too often nonprofits sort of we abandon sort of these ideas when we think about our own stories. Too often we try to write stories about ideas, or we write stories about organizations. And we have to, when we think about our storytelling in the run-up to any giving campaign, and most certainly a big campaign like Giving Tuesday, we have to come back to sort of the person, that individual, that prototype individual who benefits from our service. Like, we have to tell their story. Another point, and this is embedded in the question, slogans never, ever, ever contain a story. Slogans, by definition, are meant to be ephemeral and not have sort of deep meaning. They're meant to sort of scratch the surface, just make you think a certain way. But again, the thought is sort of fleeting. So here, you most certainly, as you note, should not depend on a slogan or a gimmicky catchphrase, but instead dig deep, think about the person who's benefiting from the service, and tell their story.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, Princess, you have had significant grant writing experience as a founder of a nonprofit and as well as a director in others, and in your current role as director of the UIC Certificate Nonprofit Management Program. Can you share some strategies that you've used to craft your nonprofit stories? And Dan, I hope I didn't cut you off. Did I?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you, Valerie. And I think Dan really hit the main high notes. And when I talked to nonprofits and when I was writing grants ourselves, when you're trying to get that character, oftentimes nonprofits start thinking about their message and their character when it's time to ask for funding. And they actually should be thinking about that all the time. They should understand who they are. They should know their why. They should know their mission. They started this nonprofit for a reason. So the question is, what is that reason? What motivates you? What inspires you? And how can you translate, as Dan said, so aptly, that emotion to the folks that you're trying to reach? And how can they be inspired and be passionate? But first, you have to know your why. You also have to know what sets you apart. Okay, you know, what's different about you and others. And we're not talking about hyperbole or racing to the bottom, saying I started from nothing and now I have $100,000, or talking about racing to the top, but now I have $1 million a week. But it really is, you know, what is your impact? How are you serving that passion that you said that you started as an organization for? How are you actualizing that? But as Dan said about slogan, you got to be true to your brand, right? So I'm not Nike, so I can't, say, I can do all these things for you if I actually sell candy bars. So really understanding, don't fall into that trap of hyperbole. Don't exaggerate, because people can spot or smell something that's not true. Be concise. We always talk about less is more. Right? So making sure that it's simple. Oftentimes when I advise nonprofits, I talk about these 3 areas, and you're talking about describing your message. And it really is 3 fundamentals. It's problem, solution, success. You got to be able to figure out how your organization, what issue that your organization is trying to solve, or you're helping that character overcome. What is the solution to that? So how does your organization help with that, and how have you been successful in doing that? And then for the funder perspective, how can they help you do that? Right? How can they have an impact? Right? How can they be involved in helping that character overcome whatever? And then the last 3 are sense of belonging and getting personal. Right? You want something that speaks to the funder, but you think about that person that really kind of evoked that emotion that you have before. But you really have to know thyself. Believe that you can actually achieve that and have the confidence, right? So when you're saying that you can have X outcome, knowing that you're actually able to do that. And then lastly, having a vision, right? So you're asking for something now, what's going to happen when they give it to you, and then what's going to happen after that, So you have a or it's kind of like some of the strategies that show that we employ that is similar to any space, as Dan said, for profit, or even if you're in a department trying to get volunteers to be involved.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. All right, I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Daniel Ash, Chief Marketing Officer at the Chicago Community Trust, and Princess Currence, the Director of the UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management Program. We'll be taking questions from our listening audience in chat room in about the 30-minute mark, so about 2:30 or so. And the call-in number is 347-884-8121. And again, if you're participating on Facebook, today we're asking that you go to the CNM Facebook page. So that's at CNM UIC. Is that it? Or, I'm sorry, I think I got it wrong.
At UIC CNM. Yep, that's close.
I'm sorry about that. So thank you so much for that, Princess. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel. Dan, there is a lot of emphasis on nonprofits developing their stories. And at the same time, funders also have their narratives. So can you share some strategies that nonprofits can use to make sure their narratives are in alignment with funders' narratives? And then two, I know you touched on it, but a lot of times when we think about tell your story, can you start off by reminding us what exactly does that mean? Because I know somebody like me, I never met a word I didn't like. I'll just go on and on and on, as you can tell from this question. So at any rate, can you share some of the strategies where folks are exchanging stories, more or less?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me go. I want to pick up on that because it does tell directly to this question. The phrase "know thyself" a lot of times. Right? And one way to think about this is that every institution, every organization, department, doesn't matter the context, but you have to know your emotional core, right? Like what's at the core of your cause? What are you trying to do? So when people hear the word branding, particularly if they think about brand management, ultimately, when you talk about branding, you're talking about emotion. And again, the commercial examples like Nike are sort of easy to wrap your mind because it gets so well, right? But then, and it all starts with knowing who you are, what you are, why you exist, that sense of purpose. Now, as you think about funders, first of all, in the context of Giving Tuesday, I wanted the audience to not think of funder as an institution, but think of funder as donors, individuals who, as individuals, we all have an emotional core, right? We all have sort of this deep sense of who we are. And we all know that there's for some, for many of us, a struggle to tap into that, to understand that, and that's functional. But when it comes to communicating a message to an individual, I mean, you're often trying to sort of think about who you are and how you express it so you connect with that other human being. Particularly in Giving Tuesday, you're talking about gifts of 10, 15, 25 dollars. You're talking about, say, in the business, retail fundraising, right? The people who respond to campaigns are responding to is a rational sort of this action in response to an emotional trigger, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I go back to the statement I made at the top of this broadcast. In many cases, people give because they're giving because of this natural, innate sense to be human, be generous, be giving. So I don't want the end user, the person listening here, to sort of forget about that. Another sort of point I want to make is think about long-term and institutional funders like the Chicago Community Trust, a large foundation, family foundation. They too have emotional cores as a business. And you have to spend a significant amount of time trying to sort of tap into this. Let me give you a couple of examples. There's some institutional funders that at their core, at their emotional core, it's research, it's academic, it's scholar, it's in some cases, for others, it's advocacy. In some cases, it's all about direct service, very similar to an individual, right, response. What you have to, as you think about storytelling, and whether your story and whether it aligns with the story of the foundation, you really have to spend your time understanding what that institution. Now, my belief is that if you're a nonprofit seeking funds, in most cases, there is an opportunity to align sort of your story with a funder. Now, of course, if you're a direct service organization and that's all you do, and a funder is only funds research, don't waste your time. Right? So there has to be some pragmatism there where you understand your target. But if you assume that there's, again, they fund things that you do, how you position your work has to start with what you do. So it's about your story, not about theirs. But then you can think about sort of emphasis, and then decide to sort of promote or sort of push forward more aggressively certain aspects of the story that resonate or can align more prominently than others. One way to the trust, for example, is placement. If you're engaging a community foundation, trying to find ways to underscore how your story, the characters are connected to place is an important way of communicating to the community foundation. So again, there's certain categories that kind of guide you, in terms of like where the alignment should be. There's some funders that place doesn't matter. National funders, many of them. They're global funders, and they think about issues, think about themes. And again, sort of focus on place in that context may not be as important. But again, that type of due diligence, that type of research is helpful. But now I say this to say that doing your homework matters, but as you think about the actual construction of a story and the delivery of a story, it still has to come back to character, it still has to come back to a challenge/conflict, it still has to come down to how that character, particularly with the interventions or the services was provided by a nonprofit, overcome those challenges, right? Too often we do all of that work and then we bury our lead. you bury the character, right? And you make it more about the institution. When I arrived at the trust, Valerie, Princess, you probably can appreciate this too. When we're a 102-year-old organization, and too often some of our literature, particularly I guess as we age and approached our centennial, began with the fact that we were 100 years old. And while that's a very powerful notion, that been around, so the ability to endure, is that the most important part of the story? Is that the thing that's going to make you relevant? Right. So I would often sort of challenge my team to think, it's important to celebrate this, but can we celebrate in a way that puts us in the now, right? Puts us here. So our history provides guidance, provides a sense of depth that is critical. But if you spend too much time there, people will see you as default disconnected from now. Right. So again, as I think about alignment of a nonprofit's narrative with potential donor, individual, institution. It's do your homework. A, B, know your story, and then find ways to build emphasis in a way that aligns.
Mm-hmm.
If you find yourself rewriting your story, you're taking the wrong step.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I always heard that good writing is rewriting.
well, I think no. You have to iterate your story in order to get it right. But if you find yourself adapting your story to the point where you're changing your story in order to align with the nonprofit, you're wasting your time. Yeah.
Well, authenticity then, right?
Exactly. If you're not authentic to yourself, the donor's individual donor, an individual, and an institution will pick up on an inauthentic story. Feel it.
Okay.
And you feel it because you don't feel it, right? Like when you feel an emotional core, it's because it's real. In my opinion, you can't consistently represent true emotion in an inauthentic way. People know it's inauthentic, right? So to me, institutions become inauthentic when they start massaging, adapting, repositioning their story to the point where they lose that emotional core. They lose that know thyself. Right? When you lose your own story, then, quite frankly, nobody will respond to you emotionally. If they don't respond to you emotionally as an institution, they're not going to gift. They're not going to support you. They're not going to volunteer. So you won't see the time, talent, treasure come to you because people won't believe it.
Right, and I don't know, that reminds me of a case that I had. I can remember when I ran a small nonprofit, and we were, initially started using private funds. We got to a point where we were growing, and then we started taking public funds. And with public funds, those are really contracts and not really grants. So you're basically in contract to do a program that's already been developed. And we were trying to stay true to the programs that we had designed. But at the same time, we had to, do everything that was prescribed in this contract. And at the end of the year, I said, thank you, but no thank you. That was the worst mistake we ever made. I felt like we were getting away from our original mission. And Princess, it looks like you have something to say that you wanted to chime in about. You might have had a similar experience, just making sure that we don't get away from our missions or something.
Right. And I think along those lines, if you can't deliver as well, right, if you're not doing something that's in your wheelhouse, right? So if you try to go too far out of the wheelhouse, it's kind of like trying to make a dish at home. You never made it before. And then you don't put all the right spices in, it doesn't taste the same, doesn't have the same flavor because you never cooked it before. But if you tasted it before, you knew what it tasted before, you knew what types of flavors to put in it, and you can make it your own dish. And the same thing goes with, trying to cultivate, donors or relationships, right? You want to make sure that it's something that you have something in common, like with any relationship, right? You want to make sure that you have something in common, that you have things to talk about. And I wanted to piggyback on something that Jan said. I think is really salient is the issue of doing your homework, the issue of finding things that you have in common. But I think that goes along with the challenges you spoke to the nonprofits have because funding is so tight and so we're willing to chase any funding sometimes. To make sure that we're still afloat, but making sure that you have that shared mission. I think that's one of the challenges. Oftentimes, nonprofits are a one-stop shop. There's one person doing the fund. I know when I had nonprofits when I first started out, I did all the contract funding, I did all the hiring, I did the contract, I did all the supplies, and then I was part of the implementation team, right? And with that, sometimes lose focus on documenting your successes because you're so marred in the business that you don't have time to focus on the business. It's a different situation. You're so marred in the business, right?
Right.
So, having and taking time out to, I call it like how we're fulfilling our mission today, kind of in your check-in meetings with your teams, so you can document those successes. Because we're so big on, the next contract to fulfilling that reporting requirement, or making sure we're able to serve that client, that we forget to take time out to document, well, how do we fulfill our mission? Or what did we do that was, what kind of character came out of that we need our donors to hear about that benefited from their generosity. So that's kind of some of the biggest mistakes I see nonprofits making. One, not taking time to document what they're doing. Also being very quick to ask for funds instead of being a friend to a funder.
Right.
So, like, first time I hear from you is, can I have some money? Versus, I think we have a shared mission. How can we partner and collaborate? And I think also that we tend to, as nonprofits, do a misalignment, right? Like, as Dan was saying earlier, like, if an organization's researching you're doing direct services, there's a misalignment that people will still maybe go for that particular grant. And sometimes that has a negative effect to the funder. You have then presented yourself as someone who is not a good fit and not doing your homework, so therefore not prepared. So how are you going to be a good steward, right? It kind of like all connects together. So I think that's a big issue of making sure that you have that shared mission and have those things in common.
Okay, thank you so much for that follow-up. Princess, I'm going to reach out to the folks in the audience and see if they have any questions, and then we'll come back to you. I know that was feedback from what Dan said, so you're next in line for a question. So until then, I'm going to take a question. I think there's someone who has called. His number or her number is 773-624-0585. I'm going to turn your mic on, and if you have a question or comment for either one of our guests, please share. If not, I will go to the next person. So 773-624-0585. You're on. Hello?
Hi. Yeah. This sound, there's a lot of feedback when she speaks, so I'm kind of hearing an echo when she's talking.
Okay.
So
who is she? Who is she? Princess or me?
The lady that just finished speaking.
Okay.
Not you. But yes. So I missed some of what she said. But as far as the storytelling, I have found that I've learned to pocket two different narratives: the elevator narrative and of course, the regular narrative. And it's because I've practiced it for the last 7 years. It's really adapted to whatever changes that we've made. But in respect to Giving Tuesday and the shortness of the time between now and that point, is there any tips you could give anyone who has pretty much an established pitch or an established narrative story that is an absolute must? I may have missed it. I got it a little late, but is there an absolute must for Dan Ash?
Okay, that's for Dan Ash?
Yes.
Okay, great. Dan, did you get the question? Catch the question?
Yeah, in terms of my understanding is an absolute must, or something that we could do in the short runway between now and Giving Tuesday to maximize the response to Giving Tuesday. I think it's an opportunity to actually provide the sort of digestible chunks of content, like in this sort of runway. So we often get this question about social media, because Giving Tuesday is such a social media driven campaign. How do you effectively use social media day over day in the run up to Giving Tuesday? Here's one idea, and it's been tested by a number of organizations and proven to be successful. Finding short vignettes, when I underscore short, and I use this term in my staff, digestible chunks, headline driven, even shorter than the elevator sort of pitch, that a personification sort of what you do. So in many cases, it's telling a headline about someone who benefited from your program, or if you're an advocacy organization, reminding your audience, which should, as Princess said, should have some relationship with you. You don't get strangers to give you money on Giving Tuesday. You get people who know you, but you have to remind them of sort of your stories of impact. So say you had 7 days in a run, 7 days ahead of Giving Tuesday, and each day you decide to provide a really strong headline with one paragraph that represents 7 stories of impact over the course of the past year. So you could say, we helped get this law changed, and the law meant that X people would have access to Y resources, right? If you're an organization that works with mentors, right? If you identify mentees, mentors, and you tell both through text and visual language, through photography, you show sort of your impact. Like, this person has worked with this person for the last 24 months, and there's a quote from the mentee. Again, I know you have to get a lot of clearances, and so I understand there's a lot that goes into this. But you, in that runway leading up to Giving Tuesday, use it as an opportunity to remind people that A, we're here. 2, here's sort of the emotional anchor that sort of guides our work. And 3, here are the things that we've done. And then when your ask comes on Giving Tuesday, the ask has some context. The last point I will make is this. When Giving Tuesday, well, I've heard from people, Giving Tuesday hasn't had the impact that we thought it would have. And I've always felt that once I start asking questions to that fundraiser or to that executive director, we find that they sort of misused the platform, and they were actually asking an audience that really wasn't their audience for support. Right, and I think the key for Giving Tuesday is to work the list that knows you. So to the caller, I before joining the Chicago Community Trust, I led the membership program for WPC for a decade. And it's one thing we knew at public radio, and I know public radio is different because we have a radio station and we talk to listeners every day, so I get that. But even on Giving Tuesday, we made sure that we spoke to that audience, not an audience that didn't listen, not an audience that didn't have an emotional connection to us. So build on the audience that you have, work on converting them, and
start with your base.
Start with your base when it comes to the giving, but also my point is use the campaign as a way of telling a story to those who may be on your fringe. They may have some awareness of you. Maybe they're not at the point where they're going to want to give. But if they see a runway of content on their Facebook feed or LinkedIn page that helps them understand more deeply who you are and what you're about, essentially bring that elevator pitch to life. If that's a win. It's harder to measure because they haven't gone to the giving page and clicked the link and given it. But if you can build some awareness or deepen awareness with an audience member, that's a good thing. And then you work to leverage that through other channels over the course of time, the year ahead, the 2 years ahead, and so forth. So that was my short advice. Again, I know that's a long way of framing it, but the advice is using that runway to give bits of content that helps people have deeper understanding of what you've done, why you exist, what you've done, and quite frankly, there's elements there for what you need to. There's space, in that runway to talk about what's on the horizon, what's ahead.
Okay, so it sounds like you're also building relationships. You're taking these little sound bites, for lack of a better word, to start developing a relationship or reinforcing a relationship.
You are, but I want to make sure that the audience understands that when I say headlines, it's headline on top of a bit of content that allows you to understand something important about the work, right? Something about the character. You think about, character development. It may even help you understand more deeply the conflict, right?
I got you.
But it has to have some level of depth. But again, the example I use with social media, too often the biggest mistake I see with social media is folks, they're over communicating in social media. What I mean by that is that they try to tell too long of a story, right?
Yeah.
I should.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
And I learned this with NPR. We learned from the data, and you look at whether it's New York Times, whether it's nonprofits, people digest short amounts of content.
Yep.
It's a lot of, when you take it in an aggregate, it's a lot of bits of content, but the bits of content, the nuggets of content that actually are most effective are content that is either video or photograph with what I call kind of an annotated, the jargon is cut line, but I imagine an annotated caption. Headline, photo, caption. Headline, video, caption. And can those chunks of content help round out the consumer's understanding of what you do, why you exist, who you serve? I would, again, use the runway to start planting that type of content.
And also, you made such a great point, Dan, because when you're talking about Giving Tuesday, you're also talking about an audience that already has a relationship with you. And one of the things, by doing that is to understand who your audience is and what motivates them or what speaks to them, and making sure you're using the right imagery or multimedia to do that. We have a course that we have in our portfolio that talks about how the civic engagement course, but it talks about how do you transfer social capital into social change, basically, right? So how can you get folks who are already motivated and involved and invested in your mission, but maybe haven't taken that additional step to actually give or invest in a different way, right? And so you have to think about, what motivates that, as Dan said, donor, right? And what makes them choose to make a decision that is all about discretionary, right? They don't have to make the decision. So what tips them over? Like, what's the tipping point? And so sometimes it's kind of like introspection. What would tip you over, if you are that similar audience, or then going out to your constituency and asking them what sets you apart, so you can be able to communicate that to your potential donor base.
Well said.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that, Princess. I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll get to your question. I am going to ask caller at area code 312-355-0089 if he or she has a question or comment. If you don't have a question or comment, we'll just stay silent, and then I'll go to the next person. Okay, your mic is live. Did you have a question or comment? Okay, I take it that you have no question or comment. The next number I'm going to try is area code 312-413-3278. I'm going to make your mic live, and if you have a question or comment, please share. Okay, no question or comment, and I'm going to try area code 312-413-9075. I'm going to make your mic live. If you have a question or comment, please share. Hello? Apparently no question or comment. I really want to thank everybody for joining us. I think we have a very good group based on what I see from the phone numbers. Okay, Princess, what are some of the challenges that nonprofits have worked, that you've worked with in utilizing their organization's mission, vision, goals, and objectives to tell their stories. I know those things in and of themselves, we're supposed to include those things, but if we're not careful, if you're like me, you can make a very, very boring story. So what's been your experience? And I know, too, that organizations tend to try to crystallize their vision, mission, and vision and goals. So I'm sorry. So without further ado, I'll just let you go and answer that question.
Sure. Thanks, Valerie. I think some of the challenges are that people tend to have a mission that's too long. They may have a mission that they have for the organization that may be a paragraph. But when you're talking about trying to, as Dan said earlier, and the caller had said earlier, that you want digestible bites. So not being able to say succinctly what your organization does, what it is trying to do, and how what they're trying to do for Giving Tuesday will help them accomplish those goals. But it can't be about the organization. I think that sometimes people, oftentimes when they're talking about their message, they're talking about the organization. The organization is great. The organization is wonderful. The organization is doing great work. No one wants to hear that, right? They want to hear about who you're serving, what's the mission. They want to hear about the core message, which is why this issue, that the reason why your organization started is important enough for me to want to support it. And so I think sometimes when they're thinking about organizations, a mission, a vision, they ironically are thinking about the institution and not necessarily the impact of the institution, and that is where the core message comes from, that it's about what your organization is doing, and not necessarily, yes, you want to talk about your great team and all that, but that's not what's going to, your HR org chart is not going to motivate people to give, right? What's going to motivate people to give is how much good you're doing and how you can do more if we have more investment. Basically, that's the theme, right? So being able to articulate, and sometimes I think organizations have trouble articulating that because they're so passionate about the actual thing they're doing. Sometimes it's hard to boil that down to a sentence, right? Because this is their whole life, So it's hard for you to boil it down to one sentence to say, this is the why, this is the what, and this is how we're successful, and this is why you should be involved. So I think those are the main things I would say.
Yeah, I always have a running joke with myself. I never met a word I didn't like. I should have been an attorney. I write these long sentences with no verbs that take a whole page. It's frustrating to me, I tell you. I'm getting better, but I've still got a lot of work.
I can concur with that. I remember I was an English major in high school. My high school teacher would say, "Princess, when you think a comma should be there, don't put it." Or you. I can be very verbose as well, so I definitely could relate to that.
Okay, so Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add to Princess's comment?
No, I think she covered just about everything. Yeah.
And that reminds me of another story from college. We used to ask, how long should this paper be? And forgive me if this sounds sexist. He says, like a woman's skirt. Long enough to cover the subject, short enough to be interesting. I think I'm dating myself. I think I'm dating myself too. People don't talk like that these days. So at any rate, I wanted to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Daniel Ash, the Chief Marketing Officer at the Chicago Community Trust, and Princess Currence, the Director of the UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management Program. We'll be taking questions as you see fit. We've already gone down the list, and if you have other questions since we have touched base, I will try again. And I also want to take a moment to let folks know that they can strengthen their organization's Giving Tuesday efforts by participating in Webinar Wednesdays. Every Wednesday from October 25th to December 6th, I'll be conducting webinars to help organizations strengthen their fundraising efforts for the end of the year and beyond. Contact me at consulting@ValerieFLeonard.com for further information. So I'm going to call on some of you. Again, you may have questions since we last tried. So area code 773-624-0585. If you have a question, please share. If not, we will continue with Dan. Okay, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I appreciate the response to my original question because I now have a visual that I can bounce off of what I felt would be appropriate in that you have your headline, your picture, and your caption. And what I found on social media, that's all people want to read. It really, especially when you have a millennial-driven market, they're not trying to hear the story. And me being a baby boomer, condensing the story has been a challenge. And I've done everything from eliminating negative verbs like not, won't, don't, all that other stuff, to trying to be as simplistic as possible. Are there any other grammatical pointers you can give for a person just trying to keep their message short, like maybe their headline is 7 words or less or anything like that?
Okay, Princess, you sounded like you wanted to give that a try.
I just wanted to answer a question, but also answer, I think, in a different way. And I think it's piggybacking on what Dan said earlier. Because people have a short amount of time and they're looking for a bite-size, able to digest something, you just don't want to have any image and any content. So even when Dan is giving you some kind of fundamentals on how to structure your post, you want to make sure that when you quickly look at that image, you get an emotional response, you get a visceral response to it. It can't be something that, that's a sun horizon or something. It had to be something, because what the picture, image, video does, it makes someone pause. So if your image or video or content doesn't make me stop to read what you've posted, then you've already lost. So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about what headline you're having, you want an attention grabber. You don't want something that's sensational. Sometimes you do, depending on your message, but you want something that is sensational to your brand, right? That makes the people who are interested in what you have to say pause and read. You don't want them to glaze over it. So you're thinking about how that picture, headline, caption is a trigger for them to continue. So how, if that caption, it should be your closing for them to continue to do an action. So you got to think about those pieces too. That it's not necessarily, it's like it's how you say this or what you say, right? So how you're saying those pieces, I think that are critical. Because people will read if you stop them enough to grab their attention to actually want to read the rest of the thing.
I agree. So earlier in this session, we talked about what the elements of a good story, and character is absolutely critical. So in social media, you have the opportunity over time to define your characters. Right? So I'm going to give an example. Say there's actually a couple of folks who do this really well in our market, in the Chicago market, school-based sort of fundraising, particularly when you see the charter schools. Set aside your opinions about charter schools for a moment. Some of them do a really good job telling their story. Some do not. So I'm thinking about one charter school that does a good job, and what they do is that they always they build their hero, right? So one element of the story is who's the hero, who's the villain, right? In this context, they serving young men, that's the hero.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a headline about like all of our young men, achieve something, that becomes a headline, and the image is these young men sort of prepared to walk off from school to college, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Really good job at saying we are successful, we have something that works, and you as donor, as a potential donor, have an opportunity to be part of that, right? So the hero is not necessarily the donor, it's not the teacher, it's not the principal, but in that stream of content, it's the beneficiary.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And too often, and particularly as you think about social service, sort of cause marketing, the person who's benefiting is very rarely the hero, the person in the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you make the person in the struggle the hero? Now, there are times in the course you have the golden apple teacher, right? And you use that, right? So I'm not saying those other hero angles don't work, but I'm using this one just to create kind of a sort of expose something that we rarely try to do. This weekend I was consuming content about the opioid epidemic, and which we could have a whole show about how that's been positioned over the last couple of years. But when you think about opioids epidemic, real context, real clear character development in terms of in this case, the people who are being the addicted, particularly in suburban, rural communities that traditionally never saw themselves as being susceptible to drug epidemic. The pharmaceutical companies, as villain, right? Government as a potential sort of hero in terms of regulation, but they're doing a lot there in terms of building a story with a lot of pathways where a reader or a consumer of the story can find their way into it. So I think as fundraisers, as nonprofit professionals, we have to sort of follow those models and create what I call sort of the roadmap of our story. So it goes back to what Princess was saying, know thyself, right? You map out, your characters, map out those character profiles, map out sort of the narrative pathways, the narrative arcs that each of them can take. And then you start using that to guide the communication that appears in your direct mail, the communication that appears in social media, the communication in your annual report, the speeches as an executive director that you give, and as the caller noted, that elevator pitch. Because he knows, and I love the way he sort of constructed that. He knows the elevator pitch, but he clearly knows probably 11 versions of that elevator pitch,
right.
based on who's in the elevator with him.
Yep,
Know your
that's
audience, right? If it's Terry Mazzani, the outgoing CEO of the Chicago Community Trust, he probably knew exactly what elevator pitch was appropriate for him. Versus he's with a group of young millennials who are volunteering through a Chicago Cares program. Again, I'm totally making this up, but I'm saying, underscoring Princess's point, know your audience, and then the flip side of that is to know the sort of many sort of variations of your narrative arc, your characters, and then you constantly have this dexterity of being able to pull the right story for the right audience.
That's such a good point, because you're talking about weaving your story through all of your messaging. That's why you don't have to, when you're thinking about your narrative, think about the theme. Like, what is your core message? Because if you have a core message, then based on the audience, you can always say and be true to your core message. You may amplify different parts of it, share a likeness around that particular theme based on that audience, but your core message is the same if you're able to identify that, right? So the biggest challenge is identifying what is your core message, right? What are you trying to convey? Having that kind of powwow, that introspective moment that people say come to Jesus moment to yourself about what really are you doing and why are you doing it. If you have that, everything else kind of builds on top of that. Everything else is kind of gravy. You're able to kind of be more flexible and scalable because you know what your core message is. You can say it, in your sleep, but it has to be concise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't riff off a paragraph to someone and you have less than a minute to talk to them.
Exactly.
Oh, I am loving this, guys. We have all of 0 minutes. It's 3:00, and there's still a few questions. And I know Dan has to get off to another meeting, and it's not like you're not busy either, Princess. So I'm going to, basically ask each of you to share, some of your lessons learned, and then give a final statement, so to speak, and then we can wrap it up. So I will start with Dan, and then you, Princess.
So the summary statement for me is, I'm going to go back to the initial thing. Stories are emotional, right? So the key to being an effective storytelling organization is to know your emotional core, to don't lead or talk in numbers. Mm-hmm. The numbers follow. And aim to make personal connections through the storytelling. So I'm going to leave with this set of advice, and I know you can't do this in the run-up to Running Tuesday, but it's something to keep in mind for the next year, and with any campaign, because Giving Tuesday is just one of many campaigns. In order to build sort of more powerful storytelling, I think we as individuals have to be more comfortable in our role as storytellers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So something I've done with a number of my teams over the course of my career is to actually have storytelling workshops. A couple of examples. Taking a team to do improv, right? When you have a team that's doing improv, and if they have to work the phones, or if they have to go out and do presentations, training in improv makes them much more comfortable. Again, owning the story, but also sort of using anything that's given to them to deliver their message. Ultimately, that's what improv is all about. The other thing is listening to stories. So I strongly encourage folks to go to StoryCorps and listen to folks as they tell stories. Listen to programs like The Moth. Read other good fundraising material. The things that actually trigger an emotional response in you is something that you probably should seek to model with your own story, your own institutional sort of messages. And then I'll end with this, and something I say to trust often. Don't overthink it. Mm-hmm. I know we spent an hour talking about storytelling, talking about it in the context of Giving Tuesday, Illinois Gives. But even if you sort of pull back from that immediate sort of issue, immediate platform, don't overthink the emotional piece. And so, again, the example at the Trust is well-educated people, many of them PhDs in their subject matter area. You don't need someone to know as much as you do to care about an issue. Right? All you need them to do is feel its importance. Right? And if you can create that level of empathy, right, then you're on a pathway to engagement. the connectedness. I'll end it there. And Princess, you can bring us home.
Well, thanks, Jack. I think it's just reiterating of those, things to know. Know thyself, know your impact, know your donors, and keep track. You want to make sure you know what you're doing and how often you're doing it. One of the things in our Certificate for Nonprofit Management course, oftentimes nonprofits don't have the opportunity to have an expert coach kind of walk them through their issue or help them build their strategy. And, the thing about our courses is that you have someone like Valerie is one of them, thought leaders who really can help you build your strategy, build your fundraising plan, even if it's not for Giving Tuesday, but thereafter, and you have a community of nonprofit professionals kind of working on those same issues. So you kind of pick their brain about how to do that kind of story development or character development. I think also with those things, you have to have confidence, as Ed said. Once you know yourself and know your impact, you have to own it, and you have to be able to articulate it with confidence. No one wants somebody who's unsure of what they can do. Okay, so if I'm giving somebody my money, I don't want them to be unsure about how to use it. Okay, I want them to be confident about what they can do. So also utilize your community, utilize your network to amplify your message, particularly if you are new to the social media sphere, you don't have a large following, but your constituency may, your stakeholders may. How can you involve them and empower them to want to get involved in sharing your story? So, the main thing is to know your worth and being able to communicate that effectively, and then knowing that Giving Tuesday should not be the only thing that you're doing. It should be something that furthers what you've been doing all year, because it is in November. So it's something that either if you haven't, it jumpstarts your plan for the rest on the next year, but it should not be the end or beginning point to your fund development strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here for you. So, our courses are all year long. They're 5 weeks. You get a chunk of your schedule. It's online, and we also have on-ground courses too. So, being able to figure out who your champions and networks are and tap on them to help you. That's it for me. I don't know if I brought that home or not, Dan, but
you brought it. That's it. We're home.
Oh my goodness! And I don't want to go home. I'm so busy listening, and there's just so much to learn. Every time I sit with you guys, I learn something new, and I say thank you, thank you, thank you. You cut my head open. I love the audience, but they cut my head open today. I took very copious notes, and I thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Valerie.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank Daniel Ash, the Chief Marketing Officer at the Chicago Community Trust, and Princess Currence, Director of the UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management Program, for being our guests today. I will have this show ready for download within about an hour. And in the meantime, make sure you join us next week when our guest will be Carrie Onestad. She is the Development Manager at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. And Andrea Sanow, she is the Grant Advisor Coordinator of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. They will talk to us about the new Grant Advisor platform. You may have heard about that by now. But it allows grantees and prospective grantees to share reviews of their experiences with foundations in their grant-making processes. So that will be a very, very interesting conversation, and I hope you can join us. So I shall see you next week. And again, thank you, Princess and Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, it's been fun.
Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, Uncle Hank, he'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage, savings for everyday life. Details at macysbackstage.com. Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage, savings for everyday life. Details at macysbackstage.com.